Hello and welcome to the She Reads Romance Books podcast, the ultimate show for romance book lovers looking for the best books worth reading. I'm your host, Leslie Murphy, and in each short episode, I share my favorite book list of recommendations so you know exactly what to add to your must-read list. Join me as I explore the romance genre and have fun collecting book boyfriends along the way, because life is better with a love story. Hello, readers. I hope you are reading something fabulous today. Now, if you've been following me at She Reads Romance Books, then you know that I love to create an annual list of the romance books being adapted into movies and TV series for the upcoming year. My 2024 romance books to movies and TV shows list is up and full of what you can look forward to this year. But I actually saw online, I think it was yesterday or recently this week, an ad for a limited TV series that is releasing on Netflix in February. And I was like, oh, I have to add it to the list. This hadn't been on my radar screen. But then I remembered what the book is about. And I'm like, wait a second. This is not a romance book, even though they are heavily marketing this series as a romance to watch. So that got me thinking, what are some other popular love stories, some even marketed as romance books, that do not have a happy ending? And here we are with today's episode. Now, before I share what the book and the TV series that's going to come out soon is, you should be prepared that in this episode, as the title states, I'm going to be talking about a number of books that are love stories without a happy ending. So already knowing that is a huge spoiler if you haven't yet read them. So if you'd rather not have these books and their endings spoiled for you, then I'll say, thanks so much for tuning in, but why don't you just hit back and listen to another episode? Because I don't want to ruin anything for you. So just give me a star rating on your way out as a thank you for this spoiler warning, and I will see you in another episode. But if you've ever read a love story or a book someone recommended as a romance, and then after reading it, you were outraged because it was not a romance, because it did not have a happy ending, and you were pissed, or you're just interested in what books I'm going to highlight, then continue and listen on. We can commiserate, and or you can find some books to add to your TBR list if you like sad love stories, because, hey, a lot of people do. Okay, so you've been warned. Either head on out or continue listening, because I'm going to dive in. The limited TV series that you can watch on Netflix that I was just talking about is One Day, based on the book with the same title by David Nichols. I'm going to be honest, I haven't read this book, but I did watch the movie that came out with Anne Hathaway as one of the stars in it. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that this is not a they live happily ever after romance. Now, Netflix is putting its own spin on the novel, and as I said, created a limited TV series that releases on February 8th. The acting looks incredible from the trailer that I watched, but man, do be prepared, because this book does not have a happy ending in, the traditional sense. In case you're not familiar with the book, it's about the relationship between Dexter and Emma that spans over 20 years. The two of them first meet in 1988, and after that first meeting, they can't stop thinking about each other. So the book gives snapshots of their relationship that spans over 20 years from the perspective of the same day, July 15th of each year. Dex and Emma face squabbles and fights, hopes and missed opportunities, laughter, tears, and as the true meaning of this one crucial day is revealed, they must come to grips with the nature of love and life itself. Now, as I said, One Day is really quite a popular book, and I did enjoy the movie, but I think I was disappointed because I thought I was watching a romance movie that would end with a happy ending, but it didn't. I'm not sure people who tune into the TV series will feel the same way or expect a romance with a happy ending,
but they will be disappointed if that's the case. I will definitely be watching it because I do love the story, but I will be sure to have my box of Kleenex right alongside with me. Now, the book that actually made me want to throw my iPad at the wall after reading it, because I thought I was reading a romance book, but was sorely disappointed that it did not have a happy ending. And I probably talk about that disappointment and that outrage I felt to this day whenever that book title comes up. And that was Message in a Bottle by Nicholas Sparks. I mean, seriously, I can still remember the severe disappointment, the shock, the anger I had after reading this because I was like, what the fuck? This is not what I was expecting. Well, when I picked up this book. So it focuses on heroine Teresa Osborne, who, when we first meet her, is divorced and she's really just disillusioned about relationships. But one day while jogging, she finds a bottle on the beach, and inside is a letter of love and longing to Catherine, signed simply Garrett. So, challenged by the mystery and pulled by emotions, she begins a search for this man that ultimately will change her life. Now, I read this after reading The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks, one of my all-time favorite romance novels, which, admittedly has a very unique ending for, of in and of itself, but a happy ending, I think, nonetheless. So I was shocked when I read this book, expecting kind of the same thing from Nicholas Sparks. I'm like, okay, if you wrote one amazing romance book, then I figure your next one is going to be exactly that. And it totally wasn't. And I think a lot of people feel that way, about Nicholas Sparks' books. Some say he is a romance author. Some say he isn't because not all of his books have a happily ever after ending. I don't think you can say he is or he isn't in entirety when looking at his body of work, but he definitely does write some romance books. It's just a question of what you're going to get when you read one, since not all of his books are, which makes it kind of confusing. But since when do, authors write just one type of book, right? Okay, moving on to the next one. Of course, one of the classic love stories in history is Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. It is the ultimate love story without a happy ending. I've never read the book or, I guess, play or whatever it's considered, but I think we all know at least, the basics of the story, right? The son of one feuding family falls for the daughter of the other feuding family, but they ultimately die in the end. And I think the way they die or the reason behind it, the misunderstanding, is just so epically tragic because you think, gosh, that could have been avoided. But maybe that's what makes this love story so romantic for some, right? That they love each other so much that they ultimately cannot imagine living life without that other person. Because the ending is so well known, I don't think people are shocked when reading this. It may still be considered a romance in general, but it's really such a classic love story, but one without a happy ending. Another book that I definitely see on romance book lists, but isn't a romance, it again, given the definition of what a romance book is Me Before You by Jojo Moy. If you're not familiar with it, it is about Louisa Clark, who is an ordinary girl who's barely, ventured farther than her small, tiny village. She takes a badly needed job working for ex-master of the universe, Will Traynor, who is wheelchair bound after an accident that left him a paraplegic. Now, Will, right, he was just this vivacious guy who lived to the extreme, right? Big deals in work, extreme sports, worldwide travel. And now he's pretty sure he cannot live the way that he is stuck without the use of his arms or legs. But Lou refuses to treat him with kid gloves, right? And really comes to care for him. And when she learns that Will has shocking plans, she sets out to show him that life is still worth living. Now, this is totally another book that will make you ugly cry. All of them on this list actually probably would, come to think of it, but I didn't add it to my list of best ugly cry romances, however, for the sole reason that I don't consider this a romance. Again, given the definition of the genre and how this book ends. it obviously is a wonderful, heart-wrenching love story. I loved reading it and I love the entire series, but this title is just one of those, popular love stories that does not have a happy ending. I mean, again, it's sort of a spoiler going into reading it, knowing that, but I think if you pick it up thinking you're just going to read a traditional romance, you're going to be definitely disappointed. But even so, it's definitely a book I highly recommend because it's so well written and such a well crafted book that really, makes you ponder Will's position and the decision that he ultimately comes to and doesn't change despite Lou's attempts to do so. Another love story that I see sometimes mislabeled as a romance book is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. And you know what? It's funny now that I'm just realizing this, but all of the books I'm highlighting in this episode have been made into movies. So you can either choose to read them or watch the movie. I think Hollywood sometimes loves tragedy, and these romantic movies that end in tragedy, or at least not a happy ending in the traditional sense, tend to make good drama. So who knows? There you go. But anyway, back to The Fault in Our Stars. I have not read this young adult book, but I did watch the movie. It is about Hazel and Augustus who meet at a cancer support group who, despite their diagnoses, end up falling for each other. But it wouldn't be on this list if it had a happy ending, which it doesn't. It does, though, have a kind of interesting plot twist ending and a central love story that will suck you in and have you bawling your eyes out by the end. So I do recommend reading it or at least watching the movie, but again, not a book that I would label a romance novel. So I'm curious, can you think of any other books that may be mislabeled as romance books that truly aren't because they don't have a happy ending? I want to hear about them. Drop me a line and let me know. Or if you've ever had a moment like I did after reading Message in a Bottle where you're just so pissed off because you went in thinking that you were going to get that happy ending. I want to hear about that too. All right, so moving on from love stories without happy endings, stay tuned for some of my upcoming episodes, which are going to focus on love in anticipation of Valentine's Day, which is coming up very soon. I have a couple of fun episodes planned just for February, in the month of love. So be sure to follow the podcast and tune in. I hope you will like them. So as always, thank you for tuning in for this episode and happy reading because life is better with a love story.
That's all for this episode of the She Reads Romance Books podcast. I hope you enjoyed it and found some new books to add to your TBR list. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really helps me reach more romance book lovers like you, and I appreciate your support. If you're a book boyfriend collector like me, then you'll want to join my email list so you never miss a podcast episode or a new book list. Just visit shereadsromancebooks.com/join and sign up today. As a thank you, I'll instantly send you my list of top 10 book boyfriends that will make you swoon. Trust me, you don't want to miss this list. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.